for this painting now, we're going to do some poppies. And you can see I've been doing poppies before. There's Rosie there. And you've got a couple of the earlier ones behind me, the diamond poppies. And I'll show you a watercolour one now as well. Obviously a favourite throughout the world. More so in England, I think, than in France in some ways. You don't see as many poppies about as you used to. There used to be fields full. Whether the farmers have changed the methods or spraying or what, I don't know. But we don't see many fields of poppies now. But I've shown you a couple of photographs on here already of fields that were in this area. Anyway, in this particular case, we're going to move on to acrylics. We've done some oil painting, we've done watercolours, we've done many other materials and methods. Now I want to show you about the basics of acrylics. I will start with the materials and tools first of all. So I've set up my little photograph here beside my work ready to do. This is a piece of mount card, dark mount card, and it's rather nice to paint on with acrylics. It soaks in the paint a bit at first, but you soon get the layers built up. And it gives you a coloured ground already. So this is good quality acid-free mount card. And then down here we have the tools we're going to work with. Now let's work our way through. We've got various tubes of acrylics here. This is the way you normally see them in the shops. This is Acrylicolor itself, one of the originals. Acrylics can be, again, different qualities, the same as artist materials and students. And the Acrylicolor is an artist quality, and of course you can get cheaper ones. But the only problem with the cheaper ones is that they're often thinner, and especially with the yellow, that can be a bit of a nuisance. Although I do remember that the lemon yellow in acrylic was in Acrylo was not that good a quality. Or you can buy great big tubs as well. Depends how much you're going to paint with them. Now the next thing is this, which is called a Stay Wet palette, and that's a very useful tool. It's a palette which has on the bottom we put some kitchen roll or tissue paper, even blotting paper will do, and wet that, and the paints go on top. Now as long as you don't tilt it and slide it in the car, because everything slides down otherwise, it's great because the dampness with the lid on keeps the paints wet forever. I mean, as long as it stays wet, those paints will stay wet. You know, with acrylics, one of the problems is they dry very, very quickly. I remember painting in Switzerland and the stuff was drying on my brush before I could get it to the canvas. It was so hot. So that's a useful way of keeping your acrylics and working with them. Then I'm going to mix in the palette next to it. I like one of these big palettes. Now a cheaper alternative are these sort of sandwich boxes. These very thin boxes I managed to buy in a cheap plastic box shop. And two of those will be quite adequate. I mean, one will do for putting the paints in and one for mixing in. So there's another alternative and other ways of thought there to save some money. So I'll move back on for a moment before we start. I'm going to use my nylon brushes again. I do like these nylon brushes for nearly everything. A good hardware, and I prefer a long handle as well so I can reach out and touch the canvas without getting too close to it. And of course a bit of water, and there we are, ready to go. And I want to start with my larger brush. I'm going to start with the sky and horizon. I like to start with the horizon because it's usually a mid-tone. Actually, start with a rose in that. As painting into this card, things soak in very quickly. You might find my colours a little strange at first, but then I look at a colour and I see what's glowing through it. And then place your other colours on top in broken colour to give it an effective light, to really get an effective luminosity of a hot summer's day. And this is where this business of different mediums comes in, because possibly if I was painting a Scottish scene, I might prefer to have watercolour and do just a few limited colours like ultramarine and Prussian and burnt sienna, yellow ochre and so on, and have it very dour and very grey. Now while that's drying off, I'm going to work on other colours coming down through there, and earlier on I've shown you how to do underpainting for distant trees, for instance like that there, and I'm going to do the same here and put a very light bluey mauve into that. And they get stronger as they come down there, so I've got to worry about that for the moment. Some cerulean up there. And now to my yellow. I'll come back and blend that in just a moment, but you see how already we've got a wonderful sparkle going on with this broken colour technique. While I've got that cerulean and that yellow in the palette, I'll just blend them together and you see what happens now. And we can use this again thinly like a glaze and just paint over the surfaces here of these treetops I'm just using the thinned down colours to glaze in the distant colours that I want there. A little bit more warm there, so I'm going to add a little bit of yellow ochre into this bit here. A touch of white in that, just make it a bit lighter. I'm going to go Cooley-ette in there, but let's just see how that looks. It's quite bright in there, so paint that right up to there. A rapid way of painting. Again, I'm showing you ways that I use out in the field. I'm showing you ways that we use in plein air, so that you can do just the same when you're actually painting outdoors. It's a lovely way to work, very rapid. If the colour starts to sink too much as the board soaks it in, then you've got to go back and give it a second coat, but it will eventually seal itself off. Now I need to make a much warmer green there again to come in there. I'm going to take some of that purple as well and just add some of the green to that. I'm going to take some Viridian now and add some Viridian to that to give myself a lovely cool green here. And to thin it down a bit, just go back and add a glaze over some of this distant hill, just to give a bit more green to the summer colours of that, which will vibrate as well against the reds of the sky. So we're playing opposites in the colour circle here as well, of course. There we go. Now back down to this one. I'm going to take some raw umber now and add that to the colour and see how much warmer that is. Quite dark and quite warm back there. Maybe too much so we'll just... Leaving the figure out till the end, I'm going to just work my way down this field. Now we need to cover this area fairly rapidly. We're going to go back to my big brush now, my largest of the... I like these semi-rounds, these filberts. You can get a nice thin blade to them and you've got control rather than just a flat, especially for this kind of work. So I want my dark colours first here, so I'm going to mix up a lot of that brown now. I'm going to paint very rapidly and I'm going to paint an undercoat for this field. I'm going to make the field look very complicated, as if I spent hours and hours on it, but I'm not going to in fact. So very dark at first, because we want these dark shadows coming in down here. But it's still a very inexpensive way of painting. I haven't got a lot of paint out on my palette. While I've got that colour on my brush, I'll just come back in here and just touch in some of those darks again, which have been lost a bit as they've sucked in. You see the different effect that gives us. Right, now we build up the next tones, and now I want to warm green going on in the background. And we start to look at these deep, lovely, rich, bluey greens. That's probably failed. Rapid way of working, and just the same for outdoors. I know I've said it over and over again, but because I'm using a photograph does not mean to say that I'm not used to painting outside, or that I wouldn't use the same technique, and it works. Now I'll go back to my warmer yellows. I'm going to take some yellow ochre again now and add that to that green, and come in with that. And we'll leave the poppies till the very end. They're our fun bit. Watch out where things are light against dark. I can see here that the hand, that the arm is going to be darker against these grasses, so I'm deliberately making sure now that I've got these light areas in. The round brush, I'm going to use the one of the filberts again and make up some very light green Let's see if we can use the blade of that filbert just to paint in some of these thinner stems. Now I think we can paint in some of the darker areas too. There's some nice purples going on in there. I'm just going to take the same brush and just use my purple with a little touch of red, little rose and purple, because there's some very nice grass heads going on here. I just want to see what happens if we can get the right colour. Yeah, there we go. It will make a difference later because these grass heads are rather lovely. It's rather nice purple. That'll do for the moment. Now we move to the figure. Let's work our way down. I'm going to actually start off with her face. So we want, now this is purple and a little bit of yellow ochre. A bit pinker there. Down her nose. Her arm down here, this purple that we're using. Highlight out the edge of the arm in a moment. That comes right round her fingers here. It's a lovely colour, isn't it? Perfect for what we're doing. And down here, I'll make that a bit lighter in a minute. A few more cools into that yet. Now we're using our burnt umber and the purple. Part of the band can be in the same dark. And a little bit, another bit of white to that. A little bit into that colour as well. Down here, it's lighter there. Well, the hat has got to be yellow ochre and white, I reckon. So there's the warm white we want. We'll put some shadow on there in a moment, let it dry off first. And you see how that pushes the darker colours of the face back now. Now the dress, we've got some beautiful bluey greens going on down here, but there is some purple in it too, so I'm going to take my cerulean at first and add a little bit of rose to that, because it isn't pure cerulean. Let's just check that colour, beautiful colour in a minute. But for the moment, let's just get the dress painted. Get these colours in and get the comparisons, because we need to get one of these colours into another to even be able to compare what's going where. How warm is it? A bit more blue just there. Let's really feel for these colours. Alright, now let's look at some of these lighter colours. The very, very light blue there. And we'll look at the edge of the dress down here and the way the light catches that. Now look at the difference that makes. You see once we start these highlights. That same light's going to be coming down over her shoulder here. In fact, there'll be a bit of cream here in a minute as well. warm. A bit of blue coming down top of that arm and her thumb and other fingers. And a wee tad on the watch strap. He looks better. Let's try that. Yes, that's more like it. Sometimes the acrylics are a little bit thin. Let's have a look here. A little bit more light reflecting down in the arm here. The fingers. And she's well on the way, isn't she? Now, the poppies, I guess, that's what's going to make the whole thing come alive. So let's take some cadmium red and we'll put it straight in there and see what happens. Yeah, it's not far out. I wanted to put a bit of the cool reds amongst it as well. A very important one which I have a hand here, which she's reaching out for. But I'm going to put a bit more warm back into her hand, I can see, because these flowers are going to be, this red's going to be reflecting off the dress more than I remembered. I'm going to take the rose and let's look at how the rose affects it. Because it's a much cooler red, it will make these others, we can glaze it, we can put it on more heavily, that's up to us. We've got some darks to go in the centre yet as well. So just the pinks. Nice and clean. Very light pinks. Fini. Put our signature in. I want to use a fairly warm colour, so I'm going to use some ochre. Down here. Well, now we've finished disc 1 and we'll move on to disc 2 and do even more different techniques and methods and materials for you. And this first picture on the disc I'm going to do, I'm going to do these twisted old birch trees on some heathland. And I felt the best method for this was going to be to show you some pen and ink work and brush and ink, maybe even a bit of stick and ink, a little bit of watercolour wash and some texturing again, and then finish up with a bit of white gouache just to bring the trees out, show you how simple it can be. But it's going to be rather fun to do all this fine work with the pen and ink. So let's look at the materials we're going to need. We're using £140 knot paper, an intermediate paper today, although a hot press would be just as good for this pen and ink work. With pen and ink work I always prefer to do the pen and ink first and then the watercolour wash afterwards, otherwise you can get rather busy and scratchety with it. Piece of stick to do stick and ink with the Indian ink, a bottle of Indian ink, 2 waterproof fine line pens which are great for doing the fine twigs and branches or cross-hatching work, a small brush, and I'll have my wash brush as well just to finish off with the washes, and that should be all I need. And I'm going to start off with my heavier work. I'm going to start off with my stick and ink work with the stick and a little bit of Indian ink, pour some into my palette. Indian ink, wonderful stuff, waterproof afterwards once it's dried, but be careful where you get it because obviously it's very dangerous stuff in the fact that it is waterproof, and if you get it all over yourself you can be in a right mess. So a stick and ink, brush and ink are both beautiful ways to work. So I can work with either my stick or my brush to do this sort of work. It's amazing how much of a line you can make with a bit of stick like this. I'll just dip it into my palette and you'll see what I mean. I'm not going to even bother drawing in pencil on this. I'm just going to go straight in with the stick. Because this paper is very absorbent. It's actually a bit nicer on ordinary cartridge paper. But you know, you can draw a line 1 inch long this way quite easily. I'll go right the way down here. And I haven't got to recharge this bottle at all yet. So I can use my stick or a fine brush to do this work. I'm going to just build up all of these trees, all these tangled branches. And the stick is ideal for this because you can get this business of these ancient wind-blown branches coming up here. I just got to build up these trunks first. A double line there because it is a whole trunk, and one here as well the same, although I'm going to paint white in between later if I need to. And the usual business of trees growing from thick to thin, never thin to thick. Some wonderful shapes here that are twisting and I can just simulate. I'm not going to emulate, I'm not going to. More and more and more of these, build them up. We have a whole lattice work, which is again what I think this picture is about. All these little twigs and lattice work and branches. At the moment just with the bit of stick, but later we'll use the pens. And I'm going to use the brush as well when I finish off. Okay, we've really done all our medium branches now. It's about time to start on the little tiny ones. So I'll put away my bit of stick, pick up one of the pens, and we'll start to do all these little fine lines, masses and masses and masses of them. Right, now I'm going to move to my brush, number 6 round, and we'll start to look at some of these slightly heavier marks on the black ink with that. We've done our sticker ink, now I can do from thick to thin with the brush, just pushing a bit harder with the brush. Come down into here, and we start to get some of these rather nice dark branches then coming in. These snake-like, lovely dark. I can think about the washes in the background colours. To give more of an effect of these twigs at the end, I'm going to take my wash brush and with a bit of clean water just drop in where a lot of these tangles are in these areas. So a little bit of the ink is shifting because it's still wet, so that's alright, I don't mind that. And I'm just going to drop into those areas a little of the black. And then come back with my brush and blend them. And while I'm at it, I'm going to look at where the horizon line is behind here. And there's some lovely darks going on in there. Put the water into there. And let's look at drawing with the brush now. So we're doing an ordinary tonal work with Indian ink, stick and fine line pens and some brushes. It's a rapid way of working, it's a lovely way. And again, just a touch of my ink, and let's look at where these dark areas are here. Around the trees, coming along and down to the grasses. Let the gravity do the work as well. All the way back into here, and we'll do our colours at the very end. Lovely effects we can get them. Shadow coming down right up from the trees here, right through here. Standard watercolour techniques, just feel some of the grasses a bit. Dark actually comes from right down here, very black down there, working through it. Quite fun working like this. So that's our tonal work done. Now we let that dry and then we'll come back with some colour afterwards, a little bit of white gouache, and then we have a lovely loose way of working that's very effective. Right, well the ink is now dry enough to work on, so we're going to put our watercolour wash over this now, and then finally work up the gouache at the end. Right, now then the watercolours, I'm going to go straight in. I'm going to mess about too much here. Take a little bit of cobalt violet, Just lighten the scarf a bit. You see the paint isn't moving now, thank heavens. So a little bit of warmth into there, and then the cerulean blue. Right round under there, round in the sky here. Way around to there. Now I come down to here, and I want to put in some of the lighter yellows first. So I'll just establish those aureolin yellows there. Then we'll come into our stronger colours. We'll take some, while that's still wet, we'll take some cobalt, add that up there, just to keep it more blue. Put that trickle on in. Same down through here. And a bit of ultramarine come through these areas. Start giving us some greens. And those are quite strong down in the shadows here, so we'll really hit them down amongst the trees. You might like it just as it was. I mean, I quite like the thing as it was just now. But I thought we'll take it a stage further just so you can see what can be done. And then finally, a bit of sap green going on around here just to tint some greens in. Slightly going in the sky too there. So you can see what we can do now with this technique, and you can use it as you want. I'm going to come back to my glossy now, whatever it's called. Some slightly warmer colours going on down here, I feel. Give it more vibrancy. Maybe a touch of the warms in the background, a little bit of rose going into here. Before we come down to our final colours, a bit of purple and some ultramarine down here. Just into these shadows again. Right, let that dry, and then we'll come back with our final little touches of white gouache just to bring these colours out, and that will do that painting. And finally on this painting we take the round brush and some white gouache, mix it up so it's nice and creamy and not too thin, almost like a thin cream. and then we can look at where these light areas come on the edge of the tree down here. They're slightly broken, they're not completely solid down here, and they're coming in all over the picture there. Come right down through here. And same here. So you can see the permutations we could have here. You can see how it could have been left just with the white and the washes, or we can bring it right up as fine as we want with colour and detail later. Even down to some of the grasses here, we can put a bit of detail back into the highlights, just the light catching the tips of the grasses here. There we go, about done. Just finish off here and then we'll go on to our next painting for you. So that's the use of white gouache. Well, we're going to have some fun now. We're going to try and paint some of this blackthorn blossom and some of this peach blossom together. And I'm going to use a technique, an experimental one, where we're going to splatter the paint. I'm going to put wet into wet acrylic ink first, and while it's still fairly wet, start splattering in the white and the background pinks. And then at the very end, come in with my Chinese brush and try and paint some petals. Now we're going to use two Chinese brushes in fact on this. We're going to use both the Hake for wetting the background and doing the wet into wet background, and then this one for doing this round Chinese brush for doing the petals. And I'm also going to use this brush, which is a bit stiffer, for doing some of the splattering. Once I've got that done, the paint I'm going to use, there's my acrylic inks ready, and some water, and a little tube of gesso, which I'm going to use for mixing the white. Try the gesso out on this. So straight in then with water, clean water. All the way across it. Plenty of water though, because I do want some lovely wet into wet effects. And again, we're going to drop in the light colours first, even so, because there are some nice little celandines at the bottom of this picture. We're doing a very sort of abstract painting with this. We're not copying anything, we're just using what is here. We're abstracting from. Remember that the word to abstract means to take from. So I'm going to start off then with this smaller brush and just drop in some of these celandines all around down here. Let them spread out. Darken back to my Hake, and we'll start putting in the light greens around them that are catching the sunlight here. We're using quite strong, vibrant but dark colours, so that the white paint that I'm going to splatter on later will show up. Deep green to here. To go much darker than this yet. You can see how dark I'm going to go. It's lovely wet into wet effects. Fairly quickly into this if I want to keep wet into wet effects going. I'm going to get some very deep blues going on before I put any blacks in. Just get the leaf, the darks in between these leaves. Yes, I'm twisting the brush to get these dark effects of shadows between leaves down here. I do want this to spread out, so I might even get a diffuser later. If it refuses to spread, I'm going to get my diffuser and spray it. But this is what I want, these sorts of lovely effects like this. I really do want this stuff spreading out on the background. There we go. That's my lovely dark background done. Letting it spread wet into wet. A bit more dark just in these corners, just to balance it out. Let's just see what happens if we do flick a little bit of the white on as it is. The white gesso now. Let's just see what happens. Yes, we get quite nice effects. I'm going to have to go a bit closer though. I really need a brush that's going to give me even bigger blobs like that. So we have some of the smaller ones in the background. These little white flowers coming through here. And they really are, where these white flowers are, there's a lot of them. So let's really get into this. And I want some of that obviously to link into the colours, to blend into the colours behind. To get the background pinks of these flowers. And we can let that dry now, ready for doing our final flowers. Well, the pinks and whites are still drying, but while they are, I just want to go back into our little buttercups and celandines here and just drop some of this acrylic ink back onto it. While we're at it, we'll just add a little bit more green in there, down to this lower edge. Well, we've still got some wet paint with the darks there, but I think, generally speaking, most of them are dry enough. Let's give it a little go now. We'll start off with our whites. This brush should be ideal for this if we make it into a petal-shaped point, because down here we've got all these lovely little white mayflowers. Right the way through and off the paper here, this branch of them, which is rather nice. And it seems to be working, doesn't it? Right, we get these pinks in a minute of the peach blossom, could be rather attractive. You can always come back into it with a little bit of dark in a minute just to give a few of the centre of these flowers a little bit of the dark stamens. It's almost abstract, but then again anything repeated makes a pattern. So we'll do some of the petals coming up here as well. And we'll use a thin brush in a minute just to paint in a few of the stems and branches to show that these things are linked to twigs, to trees. That's looking rather nice. Now let's come to these larger pink flowers. I'm going to mix the purple first. I'm just going to put these quite large. There's a large stem of blossom coming through here. So we can make quite big petal shapes this time. This is the cooler warm. It's a bit like Japanese or Chinese brush painting because we have to keep the shapes simple and about what we're painting about these shapes of the flowers. Continue these larger petals, though the splatter comes behind, as if there are masses and masses of them blowing in the breeze. You can see where I wanted the dark background now, can't you? Right down to here, through, two little bits of pink, maybe just coming through amongst the white of the trees there. Now what I've got to do is go back into this with a bit more white and some of the deeper reds at the very end. I just want to establish that there's a whole load of pink blossom up going through here. Wash my brush, come back and paint some of the lighter tips on these first. nice and thickly. We're using like a fat on lean here. We're using the thicker paint over the thinner paint so that the sunlight catches these petals around the edges. Get this effect of sunlight. How pretty that is. We have all this lovely sunlight across these little flower petals then. A little pink, more pink down the bottom here I think, and we'll just link in some of these explosions down here. That's better there. Now those reds I was promising you, we're going to use a rose first. Liquid into the middle of these. I'm going to come back in with a slightly warmer red in a moment. Which will make it sink back a little bit more. Bring this forward. Not overdo those reds too much, just a tint here and there, because they are more in the distance, those. Now down to our much warmer red. A little of that with the sunlight just catching it. And some of these edges. You see how thickly I'm painting this. Because they're acrylics, they're not going to be too long before they dry. Alright. And they have beautiful little stamens in them, so what I want to do now is get a finer brush. I'm going to get a small Japanese brush. I'll use this little fellow, he's rather fun. And I want to mix up some quite darks now. Into here we've got these little stamens coming out. While it's wet, we can paint these in. Just drag them out. And this will help them blend back in a little. There we are, we got the feel of that. Now we need to look at the twigs that are supporting this and the lighter bluer twigs down here that are supporting that. So again I've got to change my brushes. Start off with There's a branch coming down through here. To get rid of some of that paint, so there's too much on there. I can make a blade out of the brush, and with a bit of luck with the blade I can indicate in some of these twigs. So again, it's still fairly abstract, but we're getting there. Maybe there's a few of these light blues just coming through behind. A little bit of sky showing through here. Just to make the blue play against the warms of the... Now I need some black to finish off. We've just got to bring the stem down through. Now I want some black coming up through here. Let's hope it shows up. I think it should do, yes. Maybe we have some darks coming down around these as well. I think we're just about there, you know. We'll have a few shadows, a few little dark shadows happening back in there with the black. Just to make it stand out a little more amongst these flowers. Dark down into here. There we are. That'll do us. Little abstract flower painting using the splash technique. Some water, a bottle of Indian ink again, one round, one mop, the Indian ink and my soft pastels, and that should be all I need to create this painting. Might seem a bit drastic, but you'll see why as I go along. It's quite a heavy way of using pastel, but many people don't realise you can actually paint onto pastel paper like this, which you can of course. Okay, let's move on to our pastel now then. I'm going to work my way down from the top, start with some nice light colours up here which I want to blend into. So, although on the photograph it appears fairly white, I don't want that. I want a nice mixture of light blues and creams. So I'm going to put on some very light blue first of all. This is ordinary pastel paper, so Ingres pastel paper, so if I want to just blend it in I can do. So this is called blocking and blending. This is when we block in a colour and we would then blend it in with our fingers afterwards to get a base coat. I'm going to cheat a bit here because I'm going to use the water and the brush. And although it'll go very dark at first, when I start working up onto it, it'll make more sense. So it goes very dark at first, but that will all lighten up again afterwards. So I'm painting, literally painting with pastel. I mean, I know we paint with pastel when we simply use the pastel, but here now you can see a totally different effect, and this little dry light it gives me a chance to play one colour over another as well. Get a nice smooth even effect and literally paint. I'm going to bring a wash of that down right through these houses. I can just see through it, look, it's semi-transparent. And I want to start finding my other colours that go into that. Start blending some pink into that right now. Give a vibrance to that sky. While the paper's still wet, and I want to start adding some stronger greys down here. Bring that down through here. I'm going to use that glaze again. I'm going to use the water with it to blend it in to the paper. I can still see what's happening underneath my original drawing. And I'm going to mix some of those colours immediately, even before I put the water on. I'm going to start blending other colours into it. Get the water again and come into that. Just see the drawing underneath. Come back with my light blue. I'll start to work in some of these areas here. So you can see I'm gradually working up these light and cool blues, these warm and cool blues, and adding other colouring where they're required to the windows and just indicating windows. We find this umbrella coming down through here. Paint it nice and heavily with the pastels immediately. Darkens it down now, but it will lighten up, and I can put more light colours over it as well. I want to get rid of this paper and back in my water because I want to fix that. Now, using water with pastel actually fixes it. The pastel will not smudge easily afterwards. It's the last coats of pastel that are going to be softer. And shadow coming in here. You can see these gorgeous effects we can get now. Get the feeling of these glasses going under here. You can see where I've been with the water, it's now lightening up again. I have to trust in that. That darkened it down nicely there, a bit more still, and some of our very deep blue into there to blend in. The back here we can actually bring the blue over the black, tint that in. I want to do the same back there as well. Now if we put the right colours in the right places and the right shapes, the whole thing will just appear like a jigsaw. Of course we can just use the plain pastel paper and paint this in at a straight pastel technique block. You see how much more versatility we have when we use the water as well. Now I think it's time to block some of these in. To find some of these colours in here. I think we'll just use some of that sienna there to start to get the colours. And that person's head behind. Reflected light round there. That's better, we've got it now, haven't we? Just got to try and find the right colours and put them in the right places. A blue inside there, that's important. And then this figure back here, yes. Look for these colours. Oops. Look where they go as well. Like I just did then. Oh, she needs a bit more across her hair as well. On that side, shoulder is. So we're probably just about finished with the brush, I would think. So now we're down to our final really strong bits of colour. Now I'm just putting on a little bit of much stronger yellow around here, which will play against that yellow of the jumper, which is a bit duller. Areas like that we can bring up. Be careful, don't just put them in anywhere. Watch carefully where these little bits of colour come, because they're very important now. Let's have a look and see. Yes, that's more like it there. Going right up into here to catch the light, just glistening in the sunlight. Soften them back a little. Quite strong behind the dark of the hair there, just to bring that out again. And a little bit of the stronger yellow in here to make those light yellows seem a bit lighter still. Turquoisey blues are going on under here as well. A cool green, in other words. A bit darker under his arm, just there. A little bit of blue. Best to balance that out. There's these little things now where we dot the I's and cross the T's that matter. Sometimes just a little delineation is needed. A bit of dark just under his jersey there to bring that out. Perhaps a little dark into those bits there too. So it just turns him around, you see. Fraction there. A wee bit down in there. Gives that more depth. Maybe just under her bum here, that's it. Make her sit there. Possibly the same here, just make her sit down. And again under there. And in front of her here, I think what we're missing there is the shadow. Under her arm here, there's a little bit more of a shadow going on there. that means that just here there's a little bit more light. There we go. Lines across the T's that matter. We're just about there. Let's set back a minute and take a look and see what's missing. And that hand may be taken back just a fraction with the purple. There we go. I'll do a nice look. We're going to be using watercolour pencil, and the idea of this is for this botanical painting we're going to do, which is much more delicate, very fine, and we could use ordinary watercolour techniques. But I just wanted to show you what can be done with these watercolour pencils, how you can use them as a coloured pencil, or you can actually blend them with water and use them as a watercolour. You can link them with solid watercolours if you want as well. They're quite useful for doing very fine and very delicate work then. And we've got pastel pencils here as well, and we've got ordinary colour pencils if we need them. It's a lovely set, this. Anyway, that's the set we're going to be using, and all I need is one little round brush to go with it and the water, and we're away. Well, I've done my basic drawing in pencil. Now I want to go in with a fine line pen and very carefully put all the little details. Go straight in with the watercolour pencil, or watercolour now. If it was an ordinary watercolour, that's what I would do. I wouldn't bother with the pen. But I thought for this technique you'd like to see the different ways that we can use, different ways that we can illustrate something, different way we can use materials together, which again is what this film is about, isn't it? So I'm now working over the pencil with a fine line pen, and then we'll get on with our colour after this. Just delicately feeling the edges, make sure that your marks are about the object. So if there's a broken edge on the object, then that's what you do as well. You don't just do tram lines around things with pen and ink or any pencil drawing. If you make a really good edge to a drawing, you'll need much less shading. If you make a tram line around something, just a flat, hard edge, then it doesn't matter how much shading you do, it's still not going to work very well. So it's important that we really do observe and look at how things are created here. And do very, very delicate lines where there are very, very delicate lines. So I'm just indicating some of these objects as if they will appear ghostly into the picture. Well, now the ink is ready and dry, the first thing we do is to rub off all the old pencil marks from the original drawing. Bring everything back to nice clean black and white again. And then we're ready to go on with our watercolour pencil, which we'll do very delicately. For the illustration part with the watercolour pencil, I've got my jar of water and my pencils ready. We're only going to be tinting lightly, we're not going to be going over the top with this. And so we start with, in this case with these little flowers, I'm going to start with one colour over the top. We will start with our lightest colours. So we start in this case with the yellows in the centre of the flowers. And watercolour, remember, we always start with the lightest colours first. So all the centres of these little flowers. And as I say, already that gives us a little bit of colour and brightness to liven the thing up. Alright, we've done all the flowers like that there. Then we come in with the next colour. And the next colour for us here is a very light violet, which I'm going to put over the whole things. Some areas are lighter than others, so I'm pushing harder in some places than I am on others, just to get the tinting. And later we're going to look at the shadows on these, because we're going to need to make two different blues, and I only have one blue in my set, so I'm going to have to use it lighter, harder and lighter, unless I use, of course, the water with it to lighten it out that way. And now we come down to our blue. And we can start to tint the blue in, letting this mauve shine through. So you have to look carefully. There's no time where you don't have to observe. You're always observing, you're always checking that you're doing the right colours. So that petal comes underneath that one, therefore I've made it much darker. Much darker still under here as well. Very much darker, so I'm making much more blue there. And just gently come out here with graduating the shade out from here, so it's darker underneath those petals there. Here it's darker. Let's just see what happens when we dampen the brush down. And we can soften that in with the brush just to make the colour a bit stronger in places. There we go. And once it's on the brush, we can take it to other places as well. So if we're using that same blue, I can come into other places with it and paint with that like that, you see. Let that dry off, clean the brush immediately because you never know when you're going to want it again. We need to go to the greens of the leaves here. And for those, again we start with our lighter colours, and I want to start with the edges of the leaves where they're a bit greener. So I'm going to use my lemon yellow here at first, just where the light catches some of the leaves. Be careful, there's a wet area, don't drag your hand over it. Just softening into the background of the paper to get the feeling of these leaves coming round behind the plants. You can see I'm doing a little bit of cross hatching there as well. Not that we need very much, but just a little to blend. Take that dark down and through here a little bit just to tint it in. Now if I want to come back to my brush, especially for this one here, I can use that just to blend and soften in here to make sure the water's clean. Like that, those angles there. And maybe just a tad into the background here as well, just blending it round. Possibly here a little bit. So we can use the delicacy of this colour pencil. Let's move on to our bee. And on the top of his leg there, he has a little lemon yellow. Coming around the back here, and just a tint of the lemon yellow. And then there's a much warmer yellow. So we're going to take some of the around here. And actually he's warmer still yet, so I've done these bits of his body down here. Around that side of that, to give that some roundness, you see. I'll just come in with a warmer brown still. In fact, a little sienna will be nice there. Even over the black, because it'll just tint it a fraction. Just around that bit. And even over the black itself, to get a bit more colour. Now we come down to the flowers here, which are very delicate, so it's ideal for watercolour pencil. And we just want to shade those ever so gently. Again, I'm going to use a little bit of my violet. And just ever so gently cross-hatch where the shadow is down here. Of the petals here. And we'll come down to these white ones in a minute. I've got to go back onto those with my light blue again. In the background here. Just go over the top very lightly indeed. Just gently picking out. You see we can get the delicate colours there. And then I need to look at the very light greens that are happening inside here. Those delicate greens that are coming in through the petals as well. Actually linking into these colours. Quite strong there in places. Come back in with the stronger green in a moment. And look how delicate we can make this. I'm going to just shade behind here a little. Give the feeling of this green so that these petals stand out into the stronger greens. Blue-grey going on in the shadow here. Let's see if we can get some of that in too. Around that edge of that shadow, quite dark into there. Now these very light coloured mayflowers, they can almost be left white, but I want to just tint them. And in the centres they have a little pink going on, a little of the violet. So we'll start off with our lightest colours again, and we'll look at little violet areas of the stamens. Because we're coming down to this area now, and the bird. So down all around these little light delicate areas of the stamens. And we're coming with the delicate greys in a moment and blues. We notice in the centre of those flowers there's a bit of yellow going on. So we'll just take some of the yellow and tint into the centres as well here. Slightly warmer green, and just into some of these petals, just tint a little of that green under the shadows to link together everything. And then to our greys. Branches aren't just brown, you have to look for these colours. So it comes into because the bird is in shadow here, it comes in underneath the bird all the way through. I'm going to give the bird a coat of violet to push it into the shadow behind here. Bring some warms into this now. And get the shadow right and softer. Just to give a little depth to it. Not a lot, very, very delicately, yeah? To give it a feeling of other things happening in the background. Let's go to the daffodils now. And again we want to start with our lightest colours, so we'll come to the lemon yellow and go right the way through with the lemon yellow there. And you'd be surprised how much green there is in these yellows for the shading. I'm going to bring blues and greens over these yellows to give the effect of shadow in these petals. Now the greens I was talking about, we start to shade those greens into the petals where they are. I'm using a cooler, more bluey green now. Some much warmer oranges here, so I'm going to come back now with cadmium orange, start to work into here, and maybe there's a little bit of the orange coming into these warm yellows as well. There's almost a violet going on inside here. There we go. And then we come finally down to the cherry blossom here. Again, I'm going to need my violet, and I'm also going to want obviously some pinks now as well. I'm going to start with the pinks because they're the lightest colour. And there are a few creams in these edges of these leaves too. Surprising, but it's there. And then we'll start on our pinks. And to make that pink seem warmer, we'll come in with our violet now. And look quite carefully where the shadows are. Some's coming up behind here. Need to bring some of this colour across here as well, just to balance things out. Now I'll take my brush, again, make sure the brush is clean, and we'll just link that in places here. Peach blossom here yet, so let's look at those wonderful deep reds we have going on in there inside these, because that's going to change the colours a lot as well. Maybe a tad more pink, and just touching into one or two of these. I talked earlier about how we could paint oil paints across acrylics. We can't paint acrylics onto oil paints because, being plastic, they would peel off the oily surface. But when the acrylics are dry, we can paint oil paints onto acrylics. Most of the canvases we use, in fact, are primed with an acrylic primer. So what I'm going to do here is demonstrate the speed we can work at doing acrylics first. And then when they're dry, which can be a matter of 10 minutes, 15 minutes even, we can work the oils over immediately. So we can underpaint with acrylics very quickly and then work the oils over the top. If you're out doing a landscape somewhere, you want to do a big work or something, you want it done fast, and you want to get the underpainting done, you don't want to have to wait for the oils to dry. This is an excellent way of working, isn't it? I'm going to use my series of filberts and rounds again, the nylons. Now, always best to start with the largest brushes first, so I'm going to start with a nice 1/2 inch here. I have my Stay Wet palette ready to go. And after I finish, that will be replaced by the oils palette. So let's get straight on painting this. The actual flower, I just only need to block that in because I can paint that in with the reds later. But what I'm going to do is block that straight in with the reds of the acrylics, just to get the white canvas covered, literally just to do that. These leaves down here. Let's pop those in. Brown colours very quickly in a moment. I just want to use the purple I have here. A lovely deep purple, just to paint in these darks before I go on. Right, now we've got a lot of very dark colours going on behind here. I'm going to use that same purple, mix it with some green, take a little sap green to that, to start my darks off down here. I could paint the whole canvas this dark colour and then work the greens over the top, but working in this way just enables me to use a bit less paint and water. I mean, I know we're going to cover it later, but I might as well tidy it up now I'm at it, haven't I? See how easy we can move things around. That petal comes right round there, comes right out clearly around that bit. Good. Now let's go back to our greens. All these various greens in the background. Let's put the darker ones in first just to get covered. I could probably finish this painting just with the acrylics if it comes to it. It's a lovely loose way to paint this. Just by indicating the ends of leaves. Right, we'll leave that at that, and we'll come back onto that later with our oil paints. Right, we're only 10 minutes later on the painting, and that's given me time to set up the oil paints and for the acrylics to dry. So here we are, ready to go again. You see how quick that way of working can be. I think I'm only going to need 3 brushes this time. A small pointed round and a 1/4 inch and a 1/2 inch, rather moth-eaten brushes, but they'll do. Straight back onto the flowers and work with the larger of the 3 brushes at the moment. Let's just take some of our cadmium red and just see what effect that has on here. Actually, it seems a bit cooler than the cadmium red of the acrylics, which is quite fun because that means I can play this cooler red over the acrylics. It's slightly transparent, so I'm able to glaze it over, and it's giving me that nice inner cool of the poppy. Just what I needed. Right, let's take some of that cadmium yellow and we'll see what we can do with it. Get a little bit of my cadmium red and add that to it, and we'll see what we get. But let's just try a bit on here, see what colour it gives us. Oh, it's not bad. Could be a bit brighter, but so them change like the opposites in the colour circles. For instance, let's take a little of some much cooler red and add a bit of white to that. Because we know that some of this colour is going on down in here. I want to try a little burnt sienna in a moment, which I think will be warmer still. And I have to try and find some of these much lighter colours which aren't going to be that easy to mix. I think this one at the edge of the petal is the correct pink, to give the shine of the light on the shiny pieces of petal, like that. And you see the instant effect it has to make the other colours sing more. Some ultramarine and cobalt blues, just in my round brush now to feel these out. And look at the difference again that blue will make. Then we come back to our purples. Just feel the centre here. These little bits coming all the way down, catching the light here and there. And I can go much darker yet. I have to take some of my Prussian. We don't need to do a lot more to the poppy itself, but I think we should continue with the leaves and brighten those up more now, which will help to come forward. But at the moment these poppies are leaping forward at us a little bit too much. Before I do the leaves, I'm just going to work on a little bit of cadmium orange, because the pure cadmium orange is a bit brighter than I could mix, and some of this nice orange in here. Look how thickly we can layer it on, just down to the joints here. Now this cadmium orange pure is just going to give me that extra glow of warmth into here that I wanted. Something small like this can just make or break a painting too. We get the reflections down the side of a stem, light against dark. See how that brings the whole of that forward. It's quite possible we've got a lot of other things going on back there, similar way. So let's get a bit more yellow going, shall we? A bit more. Lighter colours going on behind here. These light blues and yellows. There as well. So now we're just picking out little bits of leaf to give the feeling of a lot of detail. We can draw these out and put more colours in if we want, but the idea isn't to draw every single leaf, it's just to get the feeling of these leaves. With this very dark colour we had earlier, the Prussian blue and the burnt sienna, and maybe a bit more of that needs to go back into here. Okay, so what we're trying to do now is just finish this painting off with our Prussian blue and burnt sienna, just to get some very darks around the place, which should just give us an extra bit of depth here and there, huh? Like here for instance, just come round there and feel away into that petal. And this bit dark here, those little dark areas coming out into there. And it'll just give these darks a bit more vibrance inside there. Little blocks and blobs of dark. And even breaking out into there, these stamens. And very dark under there, a few bits of dark coming into here. I don't want it too warm, but I want it jumping forward. I want these cools to go back into there actually rather than jump forward. I'm painting on such a large scale here that there we go. Just feel around that central column of this poppy head. Of course I'm painting right up close to it here. I mean to get the full effect of this for myself I need to get back a bit, see what's going on. These darks into here we just want to pull out and show that it is a bit darker behind these leaves. Into there, and here even, draw that poppy there. I don't use black, remember, I always use deep, very deep blues and browns to get my darks. It gives us a three-dimensional effect, is what we're after. And you've seen how quickly we can paint this using the techniques of both acrylics and oils together, and how well it holds together. We'll call that one finished. Just do my signature, as usual. Okay, moving on from that last painting, we're going to paint a little woodland scene with a country road going through it here in France. And it's in autumn with some early snows, as you can see. So we've got some little white areas that we want to put into here, and we're going to paint this one with watercolour and then the use of sponging and texture. And we shall use not only watercolour but some opaque paint as well, and sponge the opaque paint over the top and the watercolour over the top to give us all these textures with an ordinary sea sponge, which gives us lovely textures. Before we do that, I want to put some masking fluid on. This one's called Pebeo, and it's a lovely gum because it's actually a slightly light blue in colour, which means we can see it on the paper. Some of the masking fluids, which are basically liquid latex, you can't see them because they're white afterwards, so it's a bit of a nuisance. But this one is a light blue colour, so we can actually see it. And I'm going to apply it with a clay shaper. That's a little tool which we use for modelling clay with. Got a rubber tip to it, so it's easy to clean. You can use a brush, but it tends to clog the brushes up, whereas these things just rub off very easily afterwards. You can get them in all different sorts of points, as you can see here. So all I need to do is take my clay shaper and paint this where these little bits of white snow are going to be, and it will dry, and when I paint it will resist the paint. So at the end of the painting I can take it off and I'll be left with these white areas. If you just rub off, I'll be left with these white in later if I want to. Now the only thing to watch out with this stuff is that if you leave it in the sun, in sunlight, it can actually soak into the paper and be quite hard to get off. So don't let it remain out in very hot weather. If you're painting out in very hot weather, keep it in the shade whilst you're working on it. So what I'm going to do then is work all these little textures of white up here. Dabble, dabble, dabble with the stuff, and when it's dry we'll start our painting. But it must be absolutely dry. Don't attempt to start it if the masking fluid is still wet at all. Well then, that's enough masking fluid for that. Just do the job nicely. We'll let that dry off before we put the painting up and start actually working on it. Masking fluid is about dry, but first of all we need to see what materials we're going to need to paint with. Down here beside me you can see that I have my little pellets of watercolour again. And I'm only going to need to use 3 brushes on this, I think. I've got my oval mop for doing the wet in wet. I've got a rigger brush here. Now rigger brushes are quite important. So it's got a long thin blade. It'll hold a fair amount of liquid, and it will mean that I can paint these long thin branches and twigs. Originally they were used for painting the rigging paint. They'd paint the line of rigging and the paint would close behind it slightly and make it even thinner and finer. And then an ordinary little round to do the heavier branches. Most important of all for this particular painting, some pieces of the sea sponge I was talking about. And look at the lovely texturing on that you can see. This is ideal for stippling, making the paint on here and stippling these textures of the leaves on that we're going to get later on. Apart from that, all I need is a jug of water and we're away. This is going to be a wet in wet technique, but at first I'm going to paint wet next to wet, so the two will blend into each other, and then we'll work into those afterwards. Now remember, with this painting in watercolour, we paint the light colours first. So I paint all my palest colours first, and we gradually add the others into that. So I'm going to start with my very pale, very delicate aureolin yellows first of all. Leaving white paper in between. You can see it's going to trickle a bit, but I'm not too worried about that because, you know me, I paint very loosely and freely. I like to enjoy my painting and not be worried about having to make an exact copy of some photograph. I don't want to be doing that. I'm just going to enjoy what I'm doing. So over here, a bit stronger there. Lovely autumn colours we're going to be doing with the sunlight just coming through this misty, frosty morning here. We've already got our masking fluid on us, as you see. It's all nice and dry now. Put right up to the edges on this as well. That's where my painting is within this rectangle here. Now I'm going to come back to my Cobalt Violet, which is a lovely light violet for the distance here. And just let that blend in through there. We know we have nothing to worry about the whites, because not only have I already got the whites in with the masking fluid, but I can always put a bit of white in later with gouache, which is something we've got to explore later, is how to put opaque paints over the transparent. and all of these colours at the moment of course are transparent. I'm going to paint this right the way through here, and I'm going to bring some light blues into it in a moment. I'm painting my most transparent and lightest colours first. And I'm painting this wet into wet technique by using wet next to wet at first, letting it blend into each other. Don't want too much water on it because otherwise it's going to go everywhere, especially as I'm painting vertically for you. But just enough that these colours will blend one into another and give me these effects of light that I want. These oval mops are very useful because you've got so much control to, as you can see, you can use the tip to get fine lines, and you can use the flat of the brush to do your broader painting. So I'll come back to my cerulean blue now. We'll look at the distance here. And let it run one thing into another. Soft effects of light. Whole of that tree coming through there is that grey blue. This is the beautiful delicacy of watercolour. I'll start to go on to some of our oranges in the background here. I'm going to take a little chrome yellow now. I'll start to just add some of these into the greens and go back up into these trees here and a little bit more. Let's take some of our light red now, and we'll just let that drop into these colours here. So we've painted our snow scenes, we've painted bright summer beaches, and we've done our oils and our nice woodland scenes in summer. Now we're looking at a little bit of autumn. Right? Come back here now with the cobalt, and we need to add in some of these cools coming down this tree. We're going to need this cobalt elsewhere as well. And in a moment we'll have to leave it to dry more, because otherwise it's just going to come one blob of wet into wet, and we need it to dry off so that I can come in with a bit more harder detail, which will then make all this disappear into the background. Let some of these darks spread out amongst the trees just down in here. Certainly coming down here, where we need some dark and warm still yet, but just indicate with these first. Burnt sienna now, and the Prussian blue, which really brings us to our darkest. I'm going to want some of that going on here with this ivy. But I don't want hard edges up here, so this is why I'm putting them in now, so that it has a chance to blend a bit more. You can see how we can use the tip of the brush always to give us more texture. While I've got the colour on my brush, we'll look at where else it might be as well. And there we go for the moment, let that dry. Well, the painting's dry now, so we can start to remove the masking fluid. Yes, no problem there. Use a cloth to help me. I find it comes away more easily than with my fingers. So do make sure that the painting is dry first, otherwise you're going to have a right slushy mess. So you can see there's quite a lot of white paper there again, isn't there? So what we do now is to come back to our painting, and this time we come in before we do the final work with the sponges, we're going to come back with the two round brushes, my medium round and my rigger, to paint all these distant trees and branches in, the darker trees and branches. And for that, we're going to use the ultramarine again. Good old ultramarine and some burnt sienna. You can start to paint in these, around these leaves and ivy here and the warmer colours there. I'm not going to use the sponge for this one because there are actually quite large dark areas there that I want to pick up. And I'm going to make quite a strong green there as well, because we need to bring things forward a bit there, and I'd like to have a bit more colour amongst this ivy, like that, and you see the difference that that's making. It is now bringing that forward. I know it's fairly opaque, but this is a very dark area here anyway in this ivy, and I really do want to have some stronger greens. Come back to these blue greys. Let's come back down to here, and we're going to use some cobalt and sienna. And you see now when we paint we get a harder edge because the paint is dry. We're painting wet onto dry. And now let's see, those trees come up here. Those are the lighter coloured ones back there. The two stronger tree trunks coming up and through, not many. And we've done these lighter coloured background tree trunks. We'll get stronger with our colours still, and we'll get stronger and stronger and stronger until we have our desired effect. As the light catches them, we'll just indicate this tree. You don't have to paint cross every T and dot every I. We're just indicating and giving an impression of, and I'm going to use a little bit of ultramarine as well for this, just to give a bit more blue to it, a bit more cool to it. This is before we use the sponge, so we get even more texture once we start using the sponge. So clean water, blend it back a bit. Right, so here we go then. We're ready to start on our sponging and leaf work. What colour am I going to use first? Well, I'm going to use quite a strong yellow to make some of my chrome yellow, which is fairly opaque and be quite a good one to use on this. So light colours first. Take my sponge and we'll see what happens. Yeah, there we go. You can see already the texturing we're getting there. At the moment we're using Viridian and some chrome yellow to give us a really nice green. Then we're going to go darker in our greens as we go along. And we're sponging it with a nice sea sponge. Look at the texture on that, isn't that gorgeous? And so we need to go to our more orangey reds now. Let's see if we can get some of those on there. There we go. So we're using now the chrome yellow and some bright red. It certainly does give me a very nice orangey yellow. We shall come to the bright red in a moment and really make some lovely colours, but look how this is starting to glow. Just building it up gradually, just these cascades of autumn leaves, lovely colours of the French autumn forests here. And of course those colours are dropping down beside the road here as well, so we have to put some of those in down here. And we'll finish up with the light red, almost the Indian red. Much more orange now. Deep purple and some ultramarine. Try this purple in a moment, but before I do try the purple, I'm going to use a little bit of alizarin crimson, because I can still see some warmer areas in these trees here that are a little bit redder than the colour I mixed just now. There we go. Now I'm going to come down to those cooler, the purple and the Prussian, which will give me a lovely, rich, deep bluey purple. Now carefully, because we don't want to overdo that, some of the dark leaves showing through from behind, especially here. And here, coming onto the rhododendron a little. There we go, and finally back for my last darker strokes. I'm going to make up that same Prussian blue and purple, which really are a couple of the darkest colours I could possibly use, just to hit one or two of these very dark branches coming down through here, which are going to become a bit lost as I've done all this texturing. And just pull some of these out again. I would say that's a finished painting. I don't do much more with that. Just put a little signature down the bottom, as usual. And voila! Walk down that road, shall we? For our penultimate work, we're going to do a traditional pastel, but this time on a very special paper. It's a type of glass paper, and it takes a lot of pastel, but it does take the bite very well. So you've seen us use Ingres paper, which is one of my favourites, I've also used pastel on a hot press paper and an ordinary watercolour knot paper. Now finally we're going to use this fine glass paper, a special one, and put the pastel directly on and block and blend in the old traditional method. So we're going to block colours in all over, blend them all together and then work the final details over the top. It should be quite a rapid way of working. One tip though is don't use your fingertips to blend. Use the palm of your hand like that where the skin is thicker, because your fingertips actually are very fine and you'll get very sore fingers after a very short while. So let's see how we get on with this then. So I want to block and blend in. Now we block the colours first and then they'll be duller, and then blend, and then we do the final colours afterwards, which will be sparkling, because the pastel works by being a very fine pigment and it's bound together, and when you put it on it's fresh and it's not, and it's the little particles, the little crystals are shining in the light. But if you rub them they go duller, so our last coats want to be left alone and not rubbed. We won't even need to use fixative. I hardly ever use fixative anyway because it does dull things down. Right, I want to look then at the background colours here and just block those in at first. So nice and quickly. It's not a very big pastel this one, so I should be able to do it fairly quickly. I know where my things are going approximately here. I've just marked them out in pencil lightly. So side of the pastel, block in and blend fairly quickly because I want to get the bite of this just covered in this pastel. And you can start blending colours as soon as you like. So we can add another colour over the top of this one, just scumbling it over. Scumbling is just to bring a colour lightly over the surface of another, by the way. It's similar to cross-hatching in this case, and then because I'm only just blending now I can afford to use my fingertips a little. Market scene in France. Back down to there. We've got a green coming through here. A post that comes all the way down vertically, quite an important shape. Right down to those boxes there. So just draw these in almost like painting by numbers, straight in, blend, and then we can go back afterwards and adjust other colours into it. Just blending over. It's a very simple way to work and quite an effective way to work. A bit of highlighting there already. So blocking, blending and then working at the final details. I mean that post is virtually done, we don't need to do much more with that. Anyway, let me continue and I've got these darks to all put in here. Don't worry about little details on things because you can come back on the details afterwards. You have to try and see the colour that's underneath. That's the thing with doing a job like this, and what colours you're going to add on the surface to mix these colours. Blend it. Don't want to leave any of this sandpaper showing, glass paper showing if I can help it. That's quite a nice colour, and then we've got some pinks just shining over the surface, so you can come down feeling the surface of that as if there are light terracotta tiles on it. So here we can start doing the umbrella. Just quite a bit bluer in fact, but we've got to be careful how we mix this. There we go, just blending it in, and we've got a bluey grey. on the surface. And around the outer edge, light turquoise. Just like that. Yellow. Which is actually a bit creamer, so we've got to come back with our cream and lighten it up on the top there. You can mix the colours straight on, straight together. And then with a nice pink coming down the side. Yeah. A bit light at the top again. Inside is a darker red. Yeah. And you see how well this glass paper takes the colour, that's the point. That's what we're looking at here. A tad of orange underneath. Glow there. Back to our yellow again. But this time we're going to use a little more yellow ochre, in fact, with the yellow. It's a warmer yellow to give the shadow underneath here. And then add my yellow into that. To give the shadow under there. See the difference? And my strong, deeper blue, and I'm going to lighten it up in a moment. The right colours in the right places and the right shapes. Come back into that with a very light turquoise and just blend it subtly in. So we get that effect. And finally we've got a green over that far side. A wee touch of blue just coming into that. How quickly we can produce something. Look at all the blues in here now. Alright. Just think these areas, and there I'm going to use a warm green to block in, a warm grey green to get the background of that in. It's quite dark back in there, and I can add my lighter colours over the top afterwards. And we've got a little orange going on. Needs softening down. Now we've got to work on these oranges and all these fruits. How on earth are we going to do them? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of this area of sandpaper, of glass paper. Let's get these greens sorted out here, these warm greens that are cascading down here. What colour shall I have behind those oranges? I think actually we'll go for quite a deep brown behind those oranges. Preparing to put the fruit on top. working out what colours I want glowing through in these shadows up here. Glow through when I've finished. Passion fruits. We'll find some more banana-y yellows in a minute. And various citrus fruits up here. Even the apples up there have a fair bit of yellow on them. And we have to find the lighter bits of the bananas. And you see what I'm doing? I'm only indicating, I'm just feeling my way around little bits of the colours of the fruit, and let the eye do the rest. Let your eye be fooled by these little colours. How quickly they come together once you get started. Now the oranges up here. And some quite warm reds in there. Just a few bits of red glowing in the background. And we'll look at our medium orange colours. And there they are. Now we come to the more oranges. Finally working way up to the yellows that are reflecting on tops of the oranges from the light. And you can see the effect of our oranges in this box. Now we're coming back down to here. Actually, those plums there not that easy to do, but they're going to be reflecting quite a bit of pink as well down into there. They're going to have some blues amongst them that are reflecting as well. The apples here have some very light greens amongst the yellows. Cacophony of colour now coming. Some greens amongst those oranges here too. Certainly down into these passion fruits. And we have to go back to picking out the boxes. And now our final work for these two discs. We're going to do this water lily, and it's going to be a straightforward wet in wet watercolour. Nothing fancy. We haven't done just one simple example of this technique, so we're going to do that now. But the only difference is that instead of doing the whole thing in one go, I'm going to take it section by section. So I'm going to wet a petal at a time first. I'm using a £200 rough paper in this case for this one, it's rather nice. And because it's so heavy and a small piece, I haven't got to bother stretching any of these papers. So I'm going to wet that one. I'm going to wet one a little bit further away so that I can do several at a time, but they will be separated because I want hard edges in between each one. If we have wet onto wet or wet next to wet, we know that they're going to join together, and I don't want that in this case. So if I'll do alternate ones, it should be alright. Using my nice oval mop, my wash brush, very handy brush for the job. And I'm going to start off with a very light cobalt violet, thin layer of that. Starting off fairly strong. We'll do a graduated wash, so we're going to start off quite strong up here. As we come down, we'll let it blend into the paper and become lighter till it just delicately disappears into the base. When I said graduated, it means that I can come back in again and come a bit stronger and let that gently come down. And there's a slight ribbing in the petals of this. So how we're going to achieve that is to, when we come down the second time, is to just drag the tip of the brush down like this. Well, that's the way we can do it, but I want a bit more of that, so I'm going to come round again. And then do just as I was saying, drag the brush down, little strokes, the tip of the brush down. Get the effect of those ribs. Now I can look up to the top here again and give that a second wash there. Drop a bit more in other words. It's a very quick painting, it's a very quick way of working, and bring those down in the ribs. We have a little rose going on, so a little touch of that on this edge. That's better, not a lot. A little rose and alizarin in fact. So I'll just touch the alizarin as well, because the alizarin's a bit darker. Just along the edges here. And we'll let those tint in on their own. Then dry that brush off. Come back and just lift out. So it's a dry brush now, just lifting out and dragging down the edge of these to get this wet into wet effect on those same ribs. Up to here, and drop in the rose up there. Same way, just bring it down those ribs. And there's a little touch of the same going on here around this edge. Be careful it doesn't get too dry. Just soften that in. And this one I'm going to be slightly different, and this one down here in a moment I'm going to actually put some of the yellow on first, because it's a little bit stronger there, so I want that to be, already have a slight tint of that yellow going on down there. Make sure it doesn't dribble down too much. Now we go back to the top with the cobalt violet, and again we drop in from above. Don't forget that these watercolours always go lighter later, they always dry lighter. And then we can drag those veins through again. Into there, up, round, come back with our little brush again and just a touch of the rose and alizarin into the tip there. Just dragging that down through to give a slight hint of it. Yes, these petals are now dry enough to continue, so we're doing the same with the others. We go up, put our wash of water on, and of course we could come in and paint them directly with a wash, but it's, for this graduated wash, it's nicer to be able to come in and have full control within that area. But in fact, this time it's going to be more the yellow coming in there. Just blending down and through till we get to the lighter part here. And in this case there's a very slight touch of blue going on under here. We're going to take a little bit of our cobalt, which we're going to use later in fact for the glaze, around that lower edge, which gives a slight greeny tint around there. I'm going to bring that out underneath here in those little serrations. So I'll do slightly harder weight there later, we'll do that when it's dry. Now the final few petals we haven't done before we do any glazing. So this one, quite strong. Wet against the dry will give us the hard edge. And again up into here. Around that top bit. And around there. And then we just have to tickle it down. While that's drying off, I've got a very thin wash of the Aureole in yellow, very transparent, thin coat in here, very, very light yellow. Go right up into there. And at the bottom here it's a bit greener, and I need to get some bit of viridian there. Come in there with a slight glaze of yellow and viridian. I'll have to use the glazes on this afterwards. So again, we let it dry. Once again the petals are dry, so I'm going to come straight back to that orange, the cadmium orange that I wanted to put in. Test it. And we'll drop those in. Perfect. Quite dark. As they come down, they appear to get a bit more yellow, almost with a yellow halo. So what I'm going to do is put in some chrome yellow areas here and just drop the cadmium orange into those, and that should give us the effect that we have on the photo. There we go. Now finally we've got to come back to our washes, and we've got a very light green wash going on. What we need to do here, and over this area. You see how we can give a thin coat over that, and then I take my brush and with clean water on the brush let it blend in, and that will give me the shadow right up to the edge of this, coming out from underneath there. And I want something similar happening underneath here as well. Now while we're on glazes, I want to use some of that cobalt. Again, I'm going to test it outside, just here, to give me a glaze over this. A blue glaze just coming in here. The shadows on this bit. Just around here carefully. Start to darken that down a bit. The same is going to be going on here, and that glaze, we want it also over this, because I want this petal cooler. And this is a glaze. The washes were the first things we did, but this is actually a glaze of a colour over another to change the whole tone and colour. And I'm going to bring it right down through here, underneath there as well. Make that a little bit darker. Give the whole thing a wash of that to give a very gentle and subtle shadow there. To give us that lovely glow. What we need to do now is work on the background and make some really nice darks in the background here. To do that, we're going to be painting a bit of wet in wet carefully. Yes, that's quite a nice green. It could be a bit darker, I suppose, but I think it'll be about right. To put that right the way through here and add a bit more cool to it in a moment. And as I said, we'll drop in a little bit darker into this as well. I'm going to make a slightly darker green with my ultramarine and burnt sienna, and just bring it up in areas through this, as if these leaves have got a little rib into them. It goes a little cooler, a little bluer. So I'm going to let some cerulean come down here. To go just inside the border there. Let that trickle down. It gets actually very warm here. Let's come off there. This is, unlike the oil painting, remember this is the reverse. We paint out our negative shapes. We're painting out the dark areas of this to leave the light areas behind. I've done some very darks down here in a minute, some really lovely darks. That colour there. Lily stem that comes down there. There's one that comes under here as well a little bit. Now let's start to make some darks. We'll take our ultramarine to start with, and the burnt sienna as usual, and then we'll move on to the it's really nice warm. We'll move on to the Prussian blue in a minute, but there's some really lovely darks going on down, warm darks going on down here. I want them wet into wet, so I've got to work fairly quickly before this paint dries any further. So working on the vertical, which is not ideal for this sort of work, but we still get some wonderful effects. And now we can finish off with this Prussian I was talking about. Prussian and a bit of the burnt sienna to really get some final darks and warms in there. Now, this petal we're talking about, this edge here I didn't actually finish before, did I? So I better go back to that. About right, okay. So we have the edge of the petal here, coming round there. All the way around. I think we'll use some of that glaze here as well. A little darker yet, just link that colour with it a bit more. And there we are, our piece finished. That's the end of these films, and I hope you've gained so much from them and lots of new and exciting ways to paint and explore and enjoy yourself.